Good to have you, and I appreciate the time you're giving us today. I know that you are one of those individuals that is helping the administration guide the country into the best way to basically keep society functioning while also limiting any negative effects that this might have with the pandemic. And it's not an easy path to walk, I'm sure, but I wanted to get your opinion on, I don't really want to say it's a controversy because it seems to be only a controversy with legacy media, how Mitch McConnell was discussing bankruptcy for certain states as opposed to including a bailout for these states in pandemic stimulus. And as we were discussing, with Illinois, which, I grew up next to in Missouri, Illinois has had problems for generations, for decades. And the idea that this pandemic created this financial insolvency in the state and they needed bailout, well, that's not accurate. And I don't think that's a good way to steward taxpayer dollars. How do you feel about this? And was Mitch McConnell correct?
Well, Danny, first of all, you're right. A lot of these states are looking at this as kind of a way to get out of a hole that they dug themselves in, both long-term and short-term. I mean, some of the lockdown policies that they put in place have caused incredible amounts of economic and societal damage. We have to get society back open. And Mitch McConnell, I don't know if he was throwing that out as kind of a marker, or kind of something that people could say, well, look, if we don't come together here, we might be stuck in that bankruptcy type of situation. But the reality is, states like Illinois that have a multiple of like $4 or $5 billion at least in pension liabilities. New York State had $6 billion in deficit before the coronavirus was ever even heard of. You start looking and you say, what is the best practice here? And the best practice is states that have issued edicts that have actually taken businesses and properties, they should probably be on the hook for the damage that they've caused to those individual businesses. And the federal government, on the other hand, should be looking to provide resolution for businesses where possible, and that's that were negatively impacted. I think that's the approach, and right now, I think the sentiment is no state bailouts, doggone it, and that's what I think people are talking about.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That would because then they're going to be back in that same position in just another few years, a decade more, and their financial practices and policies simply won't change. You had mentioned as well, and I like the way that you put it because I've always described this as being kind of like an eminent domain, so to speak. You had the government that seized the ability of these individuals to engage in commerce and shut down that commercial activity with these businesses, and so. It's where this is completely uncharted ground for everyone. What moves can be taken as we start lifting these lockdown restrictions? What moves can be taken by the government to respect that free market, to make sure that we are not creating a new precedent for federal dependency or state dependency? But what can be done to spur economic activity and maybe give a quick lightning start to the recovery as things open?
Well, I think there are probably three different areas that you have to immediately look at. Number one, you have to make sure that the regulatory and tax environment is conducive to this. Everybody wants to make a profit, and so if you have to defer taxation, if you have to defer regulation, and what we're seeing is since we have deferred a number of regulations, that probably aren't necessary at all anyway. But you take care of that, you provide the environment framework. The second thing you do is I think that you've actually probably had what you've described as eminent domain, or what I would would say is analogous to a taking. The federal government, not so much, but the state governments have, and the state governments have also got to provide a way for folks to be able to financially get their doors back open. And provide that relief. And then the third one, which is these are two points tied together. You got to let them open up. Businesses have to be able to open up, and you have to provide some kind of liability protection for them opening up. So that already we've had in Arizona trial lawyers coming in here trying to sniff around to see if there's a way to sue somebody for for passing on coronavirus for simply having their business open, whether it's a big box store, grocery store, or whatever.
Wow.
So you've got to provide some kind of liability protection for these businesses who are a little bit nervous to open up and come back because they know that this is the next shoe to drop. So those are three quick things I think we should be focusing on right now.
Yeah, and you make a great point with the liability protections. We've been talking about that here and there on the program because that is, it just makes me mad. You have trial lawyers still that are going out there seeing if they can find any kind of weakness to exploit. But how does workers' comp come into that? Because wouldn't businesses be protected through workers' compensation from something like that? Or is that rule book kind of out of the window because it's a pandemic and you have, state orders and executive orders involved?
Well, workers' comp becomes a little bit harder because workers' comp is typically going to be definitely work-related, and I'm not sure that passing an infection around has been ruled to be within that little shoebox, and so that may be a little bit harder. And that's why. So I've introduced legislation in Congress actually dealing with liability issues, trying to be more clear on the reasonable person standard. And simply opening your business does not make you negligent, et cetera, and trying to set the framework there. But I don't know about workers' comp. But it seems to me that that's a kind of a narrower shoebox that I'm not sure you can fit in.
Yeah. How much longer do you think? I mean, I know that we're going into the different. Some states are going. My state, Texas, is going into phase 1 coming up on Friday. Some areas actually even opened a little bit earlier. We were talking about the town of Colleyville here in Texas. You have Georgia that's reopening following those phase 1 guidelines as well. If you had, because I hear from so many people, we can't take this much longer. And these are business owners who are saying, okay, we plan for a rainy day. This is a global pandemic. It's a lot different. It's like a million rainy days at once. No one can really anticipate something like that or really plan for it, which is why we have the government reacting in this unprecedented way. But, honestly, how much longer, because the DNC was saying that, no, we're opening too quickly. How much longer can people take this? And what do you say to the DNC who says, no, this is way too fast?
Well, I think societally we've already been closed too long. I'm seeing data showing that the number that you've created another public health crisis on the side by basically preventing elective surgeries. A lot of people say, "Oh, that's the plastic surgery." No, elective surgery was any scheduled surgery and not an emergency surgery. So you've created, quite frankly, another public health crisis on the side, and that goes with your economic crisis. I talk to people every day, Dana, the businesses, the small business owners, and they tell me we're even with PPP, we're about to hold up, and you can't provide enough almost because it has been so bad. That's why we have over 30 million people unemployed this week, and there's some estimates that about 13 to 15%, the actual number is higher because the influx has been so rapid and so forced on the states that they don't have the bandwidth to even process all the new claims. I would say we need to be opening up right now, and we need to be basically just saying, just advocate for the guidelines, because that's really what a free people would do. We would say, if you don't want to open up your business, okay, don't. You have that right. We would say, if you feel unsafe, then stay in. And I would say I would respect that. I mean, that's your choice to feel that way and to believe that, and certainly stay in. Yeah. If you go out, be responsible when you go out. But by golly, I don't understand how I can tell my 100% sales commission guy who called me up a couple weeks ago and said, Andy, I'm 100% sales commission furniture salesman. Mm-hmm. I can't sell to the furniture stores that I sell to because they can't open up. Oh. What do you tell that guy? He's got no income for, in Arizona, already 30 days. The governor just extended 15 days and then has said, and also, we're going to come after you for criminal sanctions if you violate this. Gosh. So what are you supposed to tell that guy?
Yeah.
I think we should be telling them, go back to work. Let's do it. Let's be responsible. How can you say it's you can go into Walmart where they have they're doing a great job and they're keeping social distancing and enforcing all that, but you can't go into an individual retail shop who would also want to social distance and follow the guidelines. It just we produced just a congeries of convoluted and contradictory regulations out here. It's just amazing.
It is amazing, and I love that. It's so important to hear those stories as well, and I love when it's so well articulated, because you got to put real people to these statistics instead of seeing them kind of maligned in the press and elsewhere as, they just putting profits above people. No, they're trying to put their people, their kids, the roof that their kids live under. They're trying to think of that as well. Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona, a real pleasure to have you. Appreciate your time today, and I keep up the good work guiding the country into a reopening. We appreciate you.
Thanks, Dana.